those who gave and those who gave the ultimate breath on this Remembrance Day. Because business does go on. You know, stores are open, some people are at work, some are not. Some are gathering right now for Remembrance Day services and ceremonies in their communities. The Brand Center in Regina, but it is time to make this day a statutory holiday. Do you think Remembrance Day should be a statutory holiday, or should we continue the way we are? 877-332-8255. What's your feelings, your thoughts, your memories on this Remembrance Day? It's interesting that the Royal Canadian Legion isn't in favor of the idea of making Remembrance Day a statutory holiday. Spokesperson for the Royal Canadian Legion, a fellow by the name of Robert Fox, says his organization favors the status quo, which gives each province's veterans the choice. And of course, every province is a little bit different. Nova Scotia is one of a handful of provinces that recognizes today as a holiday. But in honoring our veterans, it's also an education process for those who are in high school and grade school. I can remember when I was very young, long time ago, my dad used to take me to the armory in PA, and we would go to the Remembrance Day ceremonies at the armory. And then as time passed, Dad stopped going, and we stopped going. But he would always, I remember him sitting in his chair, watching the ceremonies from the National War Memorial in Ottawa. And so he may have stopped going, but he never stopped honoring those he fought with. And although we never talked about it much, because that's one of the things he never talked about, he was wounded in action and ended up losing a leg because of it. But it was never really part of who we were as a family. Except on those times, perhaps, when we stopped in another community and he'd want to spend a little bit of time with an old war buddy of his. And that usually meant there was going to be a couple of pops involved, and there always was. And so that usually meant that Mom ended up having a bit, which was it, you know. So there were those moments. But I never really did find out exactly how he lost his leg until after he died in October of 2009. His lone surviving sibling is my aunt, his sister. And as we were remembering Dad, she says, I have a story to tell. And then she went on to tell the story of how he lost his leg and how in 1944 they were in a field in Holland. And his squad was going through this field. I think it was a tournament patch, actually. And along the side were German gunners with heavy caliber machine guns. And they would just strafe the field. They had the gun set low. And one of those bullets hit him below the shin, shattered his leg. And he obviously went down. The rest of the squad kept moving. And it wasn't until they got into the safety of some trees and brush that the lieutenant says, where's Brown? And some of the guys were saying, well, I think he's back there. And the lieutenant says, let's go get him. So off they did, strafing this area, shooting at where they thought the Germans were, managed to create enough cover so that a couple of guys could get in and pull my dad to safety. But by that time, of course, with the lower leg shattered and a lot of blood lost, everybody kind of knew what the outcome was going to be. And so there was a field amputation below the knee. But given what the medical conditions were like at the time, gangrene set in.
Oh, man.
And so there was another amputation, this one above the knee. And then they shipped him back to England. But even then, it wasn't quite right. And there was another amputation, this one mid-thigh. And then he returned to Canada, recuperate. Fell in love with a young girl from southern Manitoba. She'd actually been working in a factory in Winnipeg during the war, making guns, rifles. And they got married, had a couple of kids, and went on to be a reasonably successful businessman. And led a life that really was entirely different than what he had been through in those days and weeks. And although it changed his life, he never really talked about it. It was never really, although it was part of who he was, it was never part of who he became. And so there, on November 11th, as a young boy, I'd go with my dad to the armory in PA to honor those who didn't come back. His friends, men, women he didn't even know. We'll take your calls, your memories of Remembrance Day, your thoughts on the importance of this day. Coming up at 877-332-8255. I'm Richard Brown in for John Gormley. This is News Talk Radio.
John Gormley Live, brought to you this half hour by CAA Travel.
News Talk 980 CJME.